Hey, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever in the world you may happen to be. You've now tuned in to Talk About Your Community, brought to you by Clocktower Advisors. I'm Todd, your host, and I am so glad you've decided to spend part of your Friday with me talking about community building issues, anything from technology platforms to the social side of it, to people that are building unique and interesting communities online and offline, and my favorite, the combination between the two. This is always a high point of my week, and I'm really glad for those of you who could join me. I am always looking for comments in the chat, so if you are able to drop in and say hello, maybe mention where you're from, what you're doing in terms of accessibility for communities, because that is today's topic with my guest, Shelby Edwards from Inclusive Communication Services. And we're going to have an awesome conversation about that today. But first of all, before we get started, I wanted to mention that, of course, we're thinking a lot about all the people who've been impacted by downsizings in the community space. If you are in a job search and you want to do a little networking, I am always happy to take a look at resumes. I spent 15 years as a recruiter before moving into the community space. Happy to take a look at your resume if you want to talk about interviewing and offer you some thoughts and ideas. And of course, I know David Spinks is doing some wonderful work trying to get people placed in jobs. So give him a quick shout out for the service that he's providing to the community around that as well. And you may have noticed my strange t-shirt that I'm wearing this morning, the Todd Father. It's not because I have a particular ego about my name, but because I wanted to acknowledge and give a shout out to my dear friend, Jenny Wagle. The Todd Father kind of came up as a bit of a joke in one of our meetings of the Community Consultants Collective, which is a group dedicated to those of us that are in the consulting world of online communities. And that was a kind of a nickname that I picked up, and she made a t-shirt about it, which was amazing and awesome of her. And I just wanted to thank her for being a terrific friend and colleague, and to wear this today to celebrate her. And then finally, before I bring Shelby on the screen, I just wanted to make a personal acknowledgement. My dad passed away a couple of years ago, and today would have been his birthday, the 24th, and I just wanted to say happy birthday, Dad. I love you, and I miss you very much. So that being said, let me go ahead and bring Shelby Edwards on the screen here. Shelby from Inclusive Communication Services. I am so excited that we finally got you in the show. I know we had a little bit of a delay the first time around.
Yes.
Getting you in here, but I'm glad you're feeling better and you're kind of back in the swing of things, and you could come on and talk. Wonderful.
Great to be here. Thanks, Todd.
Yeah. So Shelby, you and I connected, I think it was a couple of months ago for the first time. I was excited to learn about what you do. Inclusive communication services. I put community in everything. Sorry about that.
We do too.
Yeah. So tell me a little bit about the company and your place in it, and like how you got interested in topics related to accessibility.
Yeah. This is a great time to talk about it too, because this is a point of my life where I'm really looking back and seeing where it all started, and just really enjoying that kind of trip down memory lane. So when I was young, I grew up in Tennessee, a very small town, not a lot to do there, but we did have a very small community theater, and that was my home away from home. It was my safe place. I was a little different than the other kids, so this was where I really connected. And in that space, we had deaf actors who had, managed to find this community theater as well. And what I realized through working through various plays, through various ages with these deaf actors, is that sign language interpreters, captioning, all of these things, it's not for the deaf people. It's for us. It's for the people who hear, who don't understand them. They had so much to offer, these deaf actors. They were on stage giving these beautiful performances, and I made it my goal to make sure people could understand them, because they were awesome. And so that translated to a college degree in sign language interpreting. I worked as an interpreter for about 10 years, loved the work, but soon found out here in New York that I wanted to do more behind the scenes to make the work awesome. Not just be out there interpreting, but be scheduling the interpreters, connecting with people, and most importantly, making people realize why it's important. So that's why my business partner and I, who's also an interpreter, developed Inclusive Communication Services, mostly to be that middle ground, to be that catalyst, I guess, for this access that we know is so important. And after the pandemic, because beforehand, we were out there interpreting jobs. People knew what our role was. It was pretty, and everything blew up in a great way virtually. Now we're in virtual spaces that we never dreamed we would be involved in. We're looking at websites to make sure they're accessible. We're captioning videos. We're putting picture-in-picture interpreters in the corner of everything. And this is wonderful, but it also made us stop and realize that with the perk of virtual access to the whole world, anyone can pull up YouTube, also comes the responsibility of making sure that everyone who could pull up that link is included in whatever content is being presented. So that's our mission now, is to have that virtual accessibility. And just to clear the air, I do intend to interpret and caption this video afterwards. So let's make sure that is out there.
Right. We have closed captioning for LinkedIn, which should be automatically, happening for us. But we definitely want to go back through this. So the live stream of this, I'll just kind of make a note that it'll be a little bit different than usual. The live stream will be available as soon as this broadcast is done, of course, but we're also going to get you a version of this so that you can do the magic that you do and make it accessible to as many people as possible so that they can enjoy the conversation and the sharing of your wisdom that I'm glad you're able to bring with us today. So this is really cool. So inclusive communication services have been around for, I guess, a couple of years now.
About 6, actually. It feels like it's still year 1 or 2 sometimes, but we've been around for about 6.
And it's just like, yeah, you feel like you just started it the other day. So that's amazing. Now, the services that you provide for organizations, do you work with particular kinds of companies, or like what is your go to market? Like, how do you
all across the spectrum? Which again, I never predicted when I started our company, but anyone from high level tech companies to music artists who just want their music to be accessible. It's a huge range. And the virtual world that we've come to know and love after the pandemic has really given us the tool to do that. It doesn't matter what the content is, it can all be accessible. And there's different ways to make something accessible. It's not that everyone has to have a sign language interpreter. Sometimes captioning is preferred. Sometimes it's ASL. Sometimes if we work with a few clients in the UK and they have British Sign Language that we'll put in the little corner. But the point is that we're considering it. We're starting to realize that from the beginning, if you're going to set up a call in your home and it's going to have a video and you want a studio, you're going to buy a camera, right? And you're not going to think every time you shoot with that camera, oh, the cost of this camera is, I have to deduct that from this one call. It's just a fixed cost, and it's just something you need to do your job. And that's how we're starting to view accessibility, which is a really cool shift. We're starting to think, if I'm putting it out there for the world, who has access to it, and how can I make sure that it's accessible? And that's a great place to be.
Yeah, no, I was fortunate many years ago, earlier in my professional career, to have worked with some people who had, some really good sensitivity around just designing with accessibility in mind. A shout out to my friend Pat Maher, who's been on the show before and is an amazing guy, founder of the IT Knowledgeabilities Network in Chicago, that is now meeting in virtual worlds for their weekly meeting. We'll talk a little bit about that, at some point here in the show. But I think something that was impressed on me very early as a technology professional was that idea that good accessibility is good design, and that's something that just to kind of incorporate in anything that we try to do. So I've always tried to be as mindful as possible about getting good alt text descriptions into images, about making sure that things are captioned whenever possible, making sure that I'm thinking at least about contrast issues for visual acuity on websites. So like all these things come into play and more. I mean, I think even coming down to how you hyperlink something on a web page is incredibly important for screen reader software that has to be able to, help somebody who has sight disabilities to be able to understand where that link is going to lead them. So
I've actually seen this. I've seen this done. I've watched people with their narration and their accessibility for the blind community navigate websites, and it's incredible. Like the technology that exists to do that is awesome, and it really does take very little effort to run an audit. And my company's always happy to help point people in the right direction for that. So if you have a website, run the audit, see where you could improve. Most often it's very basic improvements and very inexpensive improvements. For one of my websites for another company, it was as simple as changing the color. Just the color palette of the website. Blue tends to be an easier red color for a lot of the technology. So we changed our website to blue. It looks beautiful. It really wasn't a hardship, but it makes a huge difference to a lot of communities.
Yeah, no, I could definitely see that. And yeah, so I mean, some of the basics as I understand them, were things like, having a good link, anchor text that's descriptive of where it's leading, as opposed to saying, click here. To find, click here tells me like there's link bait ahead, or there's the phishing operation that's going on. And I think, for somebody that isn't seeing the rest of the context of the page and just going by that text, that's a problem with the design. Other basic things like hierarchies, I think, are important on pages. So having your H1 tags followed by H2s, by H3s, by your normal copy text. That there's a hierarchy that's followed. You're not skipping things crazy, so that the screen reader can actually determine what's things on the page, right?
Exactly. Yeah, that's exactly true. And so to consider, I think it's important with the mentality that if you're thinking about, okay, I'm doing this for blind people to participate in my site, we need to get away from the language of doing it for them. We're doing it for all of us. I mean, when you allow everyone to participate, it sounds very cliche, but when we're all included, we win is actually legit. It's good business. It's good, it's good for everything. And so we're really doing it for all of us. And I like to tell people, if you're going to watch a movie and the movie is made in Japan, you expect English subtitles or dubbing, right? Like you expect it, you pull it up on Netflix. You're not going to sit there and watch a movie that's in Japanese and not know what's going on. And so we need to think about, okay, if we won't do that, why should we expect anyone else to? And so starting to change that mentality, especially in this new virtual climate that we have and these tools that we have to engage on like a worldwide level in any time zone, it's incredible. But I think the obligation comes with the perks, that we need to ensure that we're thinking of all the communities who can pull up a video up on Facebook.
I love both of those perspectives. That obligation of including as many people as possible, I think is such an important message to be thinking about. I wanted to give a quick shout out to Jenny Wiggle, who has actually popped onto the chat. Jenny, I'm wearing your t-shirt. Yay, thank you. I'd like to maybe delve down a little bit into community building. I and many others work in the area of building online community experiences, not so much necessarily through like a Facebook group or a LinkedIn group, or not talking about our TikTok communities or things like that. A whole other set of issues around accessibility for the big social platforms. And I expect we can maybe talk a little bit about that too. But I am particularly interested, for this show and for this audience, thank you, Jenny, is how do we, as we start looking at things like a discussion forum with threaded discussions, or more chat-based kinds of community experiences like a Discord or Slack or Microsoft Teams, or as we start thinking about private social networks, are there any kind of standout issues that you think about, or like that you would look at? Is it the same kinds of questions, or are there do you have pet peeves about those particular kinds of constructs and how they work?
I don't think I have any pet peeves particularly. I think it's just important to have the consideration in the beginning, because it really does depend on the content, the platform, and the audience of that platform. If it's a community that is very limited to people and you know exactly what their needs are, then these may not be huge considerations on any given Slack. But for larger companies who don't necessarily know who their audiences are, who can spread to anyone around the world, or for larger companies who have employees who are based all over the country or all over the world, these are the people who need to take that into consideration from the very beginning. What platform am I using? What options does it do automatically? And are those options that are automatic sufficient or do you need a human? Because there are still, technology is incredible, but there are still a lot of ways that technology lacks. And when it comes to true community building, sometimes you do need human involvement. So that may mean checking in and seeing, like, are these automatic captions sufficient on this platform?
I
Or
would say community always involves human involvement.
it does.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that messaging. So I'm curious, like, so yeah, absolutely. We need to talk to our community members and find out if there are particular accommodations that they need or expect or want within the
Yeah.
space to feel like they're safe and included, within the space. I love that. I'm wondering, are there particular platforms that you have audited in the community space? Are there any that come to mind? And it's okay if not. We didn't kind of vet this as a question ahead of time. I'm just kind of curious. Like, we do a lot of work with Clocktower advisors with things like Koros or Incited, and I'm not asking you to call out problems with any of them, but if there's any that you could think of that you have encountered and you think did things well, I'd be curious.
No, I can try to somewhat get back to you on that. Maybe you could mention it on a future podcast. But
Yeah,
anything that I could talk about would be related to a client. So I don't really think I could.
Oh, I don't want to put you in a
I
position
can
to talk about clients.
share any of that. But
Sure.
I will say that the companies who have thought through to dedicate maybe one person to accessibility, or for a lot of companies, we see them as like the DE&I managers or officers, or whatever the title of the role is. If there's someone dedicated to investigating those things, like, and coming to a company like mine or like another company who specifically does website auditing, to have a designated person be checking in and making sure and pre-planning, that's where you get your because it's not going to be one size fits all. It's not going to be, if you're doing this, you're accessible. It's never that simple. There are plenty of general tools, like, but I think designating a manager or a person who is in charge of not only the accessibility, putting the accessibility in place, but also checking in with the community members who use that accessibility and seeing what's working, what is not, and making those adjustments. That's the most general thing that I can say would be helpful.
And I would imagine, much like any of the technologies that we use, that they're continuing to evolve over time. So there may be better, cooler versions that are out there that companies, if you're developing a community platform, that you probably should be aware of and be able to accommodate over time. And so having a dedicated person who is looking at issues of accessibility is essential, to being successful in that space.
I think in the same way that if you had a large video shoot, you would hire a camera crew. You should absolutely have someone in charge of accessibility, and it should be at the forefront of our minds. And it's not only because it's a good thing to do or because you build communities. I mean, that's the one perspective that I think you and I and people like us will latch onto. But for anyone who somewhat resists this concept in a business setting, I think there's also the concept of it being good business. Anything to do with accessibility, whether it's making your website accessible for reader technology for the blind community, or providing sign language interpreters for the deaf community, or ensuring that you're not using automatic captions, but that they're human captions, live captioning. Any of these things, they show an inclusive brand. And more we're seeing, from a large corporate level all the way down to a small business level, and even to an individual level, that inclusive branding is how it's becoming the new norm. And it's how that you show people we care about you as a part of our business. We're not just here for money. We care about the people using our services. So it helps with branding. It helps with business. It's also the right thing to do. It's kind of a win-win.
Yeah. If you're tuning in on the live stream, we're talking about building accessibility into online communities. My guest is Shelby Edwards. Thank you for joining us. If you happen to catch this on the replay as well, please drop in comments in the chat. Try to get back to each and every one of you who wants to participate and has questions maybe for Shelby. I'll make sure that she's aware of any questions that maybe come up after the live stream here. I'm curious, for anybody who's on the stream or maybe catches this afterwards, how or has accessibility been a topic of discussion with any of your customers or any of your communities that you've set up? Did you run into any particular roadblocks? Are there things that the platform didn't provide that you wish it provided. It would be great to hear about some of these things, and any comment from you would be welcome. Shelby, I think like one of the common objections I hear about this, and I think you alluded to it a little bit earlier, is, well, what's the cost for me to do this? Like, for me to do captioning or human captioning or sign language, around this, I know there's cost involved with that. And as a small business owner, that's obviously on my mind. But large enterprises as well should be thinking about this. How do you usually address that?
And I address this every day. I think this is probably the phone call that I have every single day. And so it depends on, I firmly believe that if you can, you should. If it's not in the budget, it's not in the budget. You can't make money grow from trees. I'm aware of that. I've now ran 2 small businesses. So I absolutely understand that. But what I tell people, again, if you could go back to the beginning, you can always make the effort. So if your effort starts with automatic captioning, great. Now, what grants can your business go after to ensure that you can get that live captioner next? And then a year later, okay, what grants can you now apply for that you've gotten this captioning covered that will allow you to put in sign language interpreters on your thing? So there are options for people. It's not only the rich can have accessibility. And there are companies like mine, Inclusive Communication Services. This is a shameless plug because it's one that involves no money. But there are companies that if you come to and if you call me and you say, hey, I really want to be accessible. My content is live. My content is all over Facebook. My content can be pulled up by anyone. I want it to be accessible. I don't have the money for this right now. I'm providing you an interpreter. I've got you covered. I have people who understand this and who want to do this. So there are companies who will work with you for an amount of time to kind of give you some space and hopefully even some helpful education, which is what we try to do, of things you can apply for, grants that could help you increase accessibility, because there is a pool for that. But ultimately, what we need to remember are the 2 things. So 1, start where you're at and see what you can do and contact people who are willing to help you when you don't have a lot of budget. But 2, start to budget it in for the future. Okay, so you don't have that now, but next year, right? What can you wiggle around in your budget to make sure that it's included in the future? Because it truly is like if you had a conference and you had to pay for a space for people to come sit at your conference, you would pay for that space. You would find room in the budget. It is a need. So we just need to shift our perspective, and that can't happen overnight, but it can happen over the years. And you can start to think about, okay, where in the budget can I fudge a little? Can I move around? Just to make sure that I have some, even low budget, cost efficient accessibility.
I love that perspective. I think that's really wonderful. So far, we've been talking, I think, primarily about, visual and auditory, access to platforms. But obviously, there's a lot more. There's a spectrum of disabilities that are out there. Excuse me. I'm wondering, for people with non-evident disabilities, are there kinds of accommodations that we should be thinking of in terms of excuse me, in terms of cognitive dissonance, reducing anxiety with sites? What kinds of principles can you maybe suggest or that you take a look at? And I'm going to go off screen and cough here for a second. So
yeah, you're good. No, so absolutely. And I'm seeing more and more of a pool for that. I'm seeing people share with neurodiversity, with various places on various spectrums, share what works for them. And I'm seeing there being more and more of a pool to try to be more inclusive of that. I am not an expert in that. That is not my area of expertise. So you'll need to have someone on this lovely show with neurodiversity to really share the movement of that, because I can't speak to that with expertise and I wouldn't dare try. I'm pretty much honed in on the language accessibility aspect, but it's so important that we're also including the range of disabilities that now have, or abilities and disabilities, and mostly just diversity of abilities of people who could tune into your content. So yeah, I definitely see it as important, and I advocate that research, but I am not an expert in that matter.
Yeah, no, thank you for that. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to put you on the spot with it, but for me, as I kind of think about that, I would have to go back to that first principle of, good design, good accessibility is good design. And if we're thinking about the kinds of websites that we design or the kinds of communities that we design, ensuring that there's not a lot of stressful distractions on the screen, ensuring that that there are clear calls to action, and that there's not a lot of auditory noise, even for somebody who may be distracted by or visual kinds of flashy things. That certainly no strobing effects. We wouldn't want anybody to just have a seizure.
Yeah, there are probably some general things like that you could look into applying for everyone, because it's actually helpful for everyone. I personally do not have any official diagnosis that says that strobing lights bother me, but if I go to a website and it's yelling at me, I'm going to be a little annoyed and not really want to look at that website. So what we have to remember is we're not just doing a lot of these things for people who need them or who feel more included when we do them. We're also doing them because most often when you build the ramp that everyone can walk on instead of the stairs, you're not hurting anyone, but you're helping everyone. So it's that same concept of why not do contrast on your website, because contrast is easier for everyone to read, not just people who are using blind reader technology. Or why not cut down the strobing lights, because no one likes to be yelled at visually. It does benefit us all. It just happens to also include. Sorry, now it's my turn too. But yeah, to be inclusive it's not a burden, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Yes.
So looking into these things and seeing that, this actually is better. It helps me. It helps everyone else too. To be inclusive, I think is a great, and those general things like the contrast. So, black on white text on black, or, contrast is great for people with low vision, not just who are using blind readers, but people with low vision who have Usher syndrome. Non-strobing, awesome for people with neurodiversity considerations. So there are these things that are specific, but we could also broad stroke this and say these are just good things to do for everyone.
Now, I'm curious, because you're looking at and helping customers with these kinds of topics every day. Like I've seen on a lot of websites that maybe feel a little stodgy or a little older design, that maybe they'll have like in the footer, a note about accessibility, that they're following W3C standards, and if you want a low contrast or a high contrast version of the site, click here. Do I have to wreck my design to have something like that in there to change it? Or are there like plugins now for Chrome and other major browsers that will automatically adjust the site based on my preferences as a user?
It's a great question, and I'm not entirely sure what all exists right now, if I'm 100% honest, because even just in the time that I've been working in this space, the changes have been dramatic and awesome. So I don't necessarily keep up with the tech side as well as I should. I'm the first to admit that, but
that's a lesson
I know
in and of
that
itself, right? Yeah. So you're in the space and it's changing very rapidly to be able to keep up with, right?
Yeah, but I do have excellent resources to point people to if they're working on their website. So send me an email. I don't know if we're going to distribute my email at any point in this, but I'm always happy to point people in the right direction. Even if I can't off the top of my head tell you a plugin, I always know the right places to send you.
I think what we'll do, instead of like sharing your email and opening up to the world of spammers for you, we'll suggest that they connect with you via LinkedIn with a direct message, and or they can connect with me and I'll put them in touch with you, make a warm introduction to go from there. But yeah, I mean, I think one of the things we promised in this was, if we have some resources to be able to share. You said you may have some links for us. So anyone who's interested after this can message you or me, and we can maybe share some links and resources to take a look at to start thinking.
Yeah, and if it's anything, so accessibility has like we're kind of looking at this as a front facing and a behind the scenes, right? So I would say the front we're facing, like I can provide this for you hands down by tomorrow. This is where I work most of my day. We do have a team of people who work more behind the scenes on the website auditing and the tech. So definitely can provide some resources.
Fantastic. That's really great. So Shelby, now as we start to see a lot more innovation in the marketplace, I have a lot of guests on the show who are either doing things with artificial intelligence or virtual worlds, AR, VR, kinds of settings. doing things with the blockchain. I'm not sure how much AI or blockchain are having an impact on what you're doing, but I am thinking a lot about virtual worlds where you have sort of these almost game-like 3D environments for somebody to walk into, not necessarily where they're wearing the stupid goggles, because I don't think that's going to hit us for a long time until we could put them into a set of eyeglasses. But in sort of semi-immersive environments, like a browser window, or I can open it up on my phone and I can be sort of in a room space to wander around in. That requires me to have some kind of visual reference point for it. What are some of the implications that you're seeing as people start thinking a little bit more about virtual worlds? And I'm almost wondering, I'll kind of add to the mix of that. I'm sure, I know there are a lot of, people with different kinds of disabilities who love to play games on their Xbox or whatever. What
Like
kind
anyone
of
else.
applications are available, for somebody? What do we need to be thinking about as our communities are less about text and more about these virtual reality, kinds of
Yeah. So I could honestly say the biggest thing that scares me about these spaces and that I deal with every day, probably not the same angle that you were going with it, but the voice that any sort of speed that comes with AI wording. So auditory. We're not even talking about text at this point. It's just auditory AI is miserable. It is so fast. It is not human. It makes it really hard to make accessible, whether that be reading it really quickly across the screen, or whether that be trying to keep up with it as an interpreter in the picture-in-picture, or whether that be trying to listen to it and process. The speed of AI verbal assistive technology is borderline not inclusive in of itself. So I would say any time that if you can create a virtual space, but remembering that humans need to read, listen, and operate at human speeds. Right? If we could start there, that would be huge, at least in my realm. But otherwise, I think it goes back to the same thing of the consideration of the audience who is using this virtual space. I've seen virtual tours that are incredible for the deaf community because they can actually see instead of just relying on reading captions about a lecture. This is incredible for the deaf community. We love VR sometimes, but we do need to be very careful that we're not using technology to override the basic human speeds at which we do things.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. That's amazing. It occurs to me, and not asking you to name names of clients necessarily, but just kind of looking across the world, are there some organizations or companies that you feel are really doing it right, or that you kind of look at as a gold standard?
Yeah, no, I can actually do that. I can name. No, I cannot name. I'm so sorry. I want to. I have several who I'm just like ready to applaud, but I did not get permission before this call to do so. But I can give you a fictional example of the one who did it right. They actually conducted a study before they put out anything to do with anyone having to do anything with disability or accessibility. They conducted a study that involved deaf and blind people and involved someone with neurodiversity, and they went down their list and they conducted a study. They did interviews with these people to say, what technology do you use in your daily life to make your job easier? There were videos, people were recording their offices showing, this is the assistive technology I use, this is the kind of computer I like, this is what I use every day, this is what I don't like, this is the technology that says it will work for me and does not. So they collected all of this evidence from real everyday people who were using their products. And then they used that study with a lot of help from me to make it all accessible. Yay. They used that study to present to the corporate higher ups in their company saying, this is what works, this is what doesn't, this is what we need to do to make our website and our materials accessible. And it was incredible. And this took a long time. And of course, they had a huge budget to do so. So we can't all be that gold standard, perhaps. Right. But it was incredible because it was based in the truth, the reality of everyday people who lived this experience. And I think that we've all learned over multiple movements over the course of the last few years that we can't speak for people anymore. We need to go direct to the source, and we need to see what are your experiences as a blind person, as a deaf person, as a person with autism, and how do I make my material accessible for that?
I think that everything that you just said applies really well to community design as well. So those online spaces, a regular part of the consultancy work that I do, and I know that a lot of my colleagues do, is we hammer that need to have one-on-one conversations with the people that will be using that community. And it's a good reminder from you to be asking questions about, do you need any kinds of other accommodations? Like, how
Yeah.
do you access the site? Have you run into any kind of roadblocks with being able to interact with this community experience, that we've created?
That that is actually, sorry to interrupt you, but that is actually a true wonderful place to start. Almost every event has a registration form. Anything with a registration form on it, even if you don't have a huge accessibility budget right now, you can add a tick box to that form that says, do you need accessibility services? And let them fill in what they need. Then you come to an agency like mine and you say, help, I don't have any money, but someone needs an interpreter, or someone says my website is not visible right now. What do I do? So to take that step of asking, of showing that you care enough to try and to be involved, that's always a good first step. And it's something we can all do with no money. Just ask.
That by itself is a nugget of gold for any community builders out there, because every one of the communities that I work with or have worked with in the past, or that I know of, has a registration form of some sort. And we're asking questions. And I have never once seen that question of, do you require accessibility help? I'm sure there's some out there. But if there's one thing that we could change about the world to make it a better place for the online communities we build, I'd love to include that question in the registrations. I think that's absolute gold. Thank you.
And I can also tell you that no one has ever done that. We made something work, figured out the money or didn't have the money and did it anyway. Whatever we had to do, no one has ever had that experience and come back to me and had anything but positive experiences after. So the inclusion was always worth that checkbox. Even if you have that minor panic when you see that they need something you don't have, they've always come back and be like, hey, that wasn't so bad. Right.
Yeah,
like let's talk about doing it more in the future.
yeah.
So it's definitely something that we can all do. There are ways to start. So the checkbox on the form is a great idea. Having a resource in your back pocket is also a really good, and again, shameless plug, but having a company like mine, just having the phone number ready to call. Say, okay, I know this company provides X, Y, and Z. If I ever get an emergency call for these things, I can go to them. I have a relationship with them. They know I don't have an accessibility budget, right?
Mm-hmm.
So developing that resource and asking what people need. Those are two things that everyone can do. It doesn't cost anything, and it puts you on the right track.
Oh, I love that. I love that. And especially like, you have a situation that comes up and there's someone in the community that they want to have the ability to have a great inclusive experience around it. And maybe they have a neurodiversity issue and you don't know what to do to help.
Right.
I mean, that's a great time to reach out to someone like you as a resource and understand,
Yeah.
what are my options, given a world where I have limited time or resources or energy to do things, what can I do to at least improve things incrementally for somebody?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And if you do develop a relationship with a community-based company like ours, or if you just go to Google and you fill out a form saying you need, a sign language interpreter, or you need live captioning, it's going to be expensive. So I don't want to allude to the fact that all accessibility is cheap. It's not. Services are not cheap. But developing a relationship with a company who really wants to do it for the right reasons, you're going to find those workarounds and you're going to figure out a way. So that's important too.
Well, 40 minutes has gone by all too quickly for this conversation. And Shelby, you're a font of wisdom for these kinds of topics, and I'm really grateful for you being on the show today. I wanted to kind of leave things with one of the earlier things you said is that we need to stop thinking about this as making an accommodation for other people, but this is for all of us to build in good accessibility. And I relate personally to this because I know when captioning is available, I always turn it on. It doesn't matter. And I don't have any particular, reasons why I would need it, but I just like it because it's additional context and it helps me to enjoy whatever I'm watching a little bit better. I care about the language of it. Or sometimes I'll change the contrast, the screens and things like that. And these are things that all of us do to some extent. And I'm also reminded of something a friend of mine from many years ago always said, which is that, disability touches us all at some point in our lives. And we need to be considerate of people who need some, extra help, getting access to spaces. So Shelby, I'm really grateful for you to come on the show. Just as a reminder, everybody, and if you happen to tune in late, hello. I'm really glad you're here. We still have time maybe for a question if somebody has one. But if somebody wants to get in touch with you, Shelby, I'm going to recommend that they get in. They send a LinkedIn message either to you directly, or they can send it to me, and I'll make a warm introduction to you around it. And you had mentioned too that we're gonna properly make this particular video accessible. And we usually have the closed captioning, but we're going to take it an extra level here, just to be. What is a way to say this? I hate it when people say like we eat our own dog food. I hate that. That's a terrible idea. But we're going to practice what we're preaching around this. And and so you're also going to be able to maybe provide some additional links or resources if people would like to know more.
Yeah, and it's not necessarily my one last little piece of wisdom is if it can't happen live, like today, it can happen post-production. We have that capability now. So if that means you post a copy of your video with a sign language interpreter, post it twice. There are always ways that we can do. But thank you so much for having me on, and I welcome anyone, budget or not, knowledge or not, find me on LinkedIn.
Thank you, Shelby. Thank you so much. And thank you for spending a little bit of your Friday with me. If you tuned in here live, if you catch this on the replay, I would love your take on this. What are you doing to make accommodations within your organization for accessibility, for people that have a variety of accessibility issues, or to make it more inclusive for all? Would love to hear from you in the comments. And the live stream, as always, is up here on LinkedIn. You can watch it in a replay there. We also have a channel on YouTube, which is the Clocktower Advisors channel, and all of the past live streams are archived out there. We also tend to pull out, thanks to the work of the amazing Kalisa Mikkel, a couple of clips from each one of these. So there'll be some short pieces of great moments here. There were a lot of great moments in today's discussion as well, so that you can enjoy them and have comments on them as well. If you do happen to go out to YouTube, I would be grateful for you to follow, subscribe to the channel, like and comment, of course. And just a quick note that I've got a couple of upcoming shows. March is going to be terrific. On March 10th, I'm going to be having the folks from the Community Leaders Institute coming on, Bill McGlade, Natalie Thomas, and Brad Weber. And this is sort of like the Community Leaders Institute version 2.0. For those of you that have 1.0, I know that I've heard through the grapevine some various issues or concerns about things. These guys have a plan. And I've had some experience working with them through a webinar that I ran through them last week. They are pros, and they're doing a great job. They want to be able to come on the show and share some of the things that they're planning for 2023. And there's some cool stuff ahead with them. And so I'm excited to be collaborating with them a little bit more. And then on March the 24th, my good friend Adrian Speyer is back, the author of The Accidental Community Manager and extraordinary strategist in his own right. He and I are going to be talking about marketing versus community, or marketing plus community, or is community the new marketing? Anyways, it'll be fun. I hope you join us. In the meantime, take some time off this weekend. Be good to yourselves, because you're no good to anybody else unless you take care of yourselves first. Shelby, thanks again. And we will see you back here again in 2 weeks on March the 10th. Take care, everybody.